Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I started as a junior analyst straight out of college, worked my way up to a decent position, handling client reports and data analysis. The pay is okay, the work is interesting enough, and most of my co-workers are pretty cool. The only problem? My manager. She's one of those people who thinks being a manager means micromanaging every single thing her team does. She watches our computer screens from her office, times our bathroom breaks, and sends passive-aggressive emails about everything from the temperature we set the thermostat to how we organize our desk supplies. I've learned to deal with most of her quirks over the years, but what happened last month really pushed me over the edge. See, I have this routine during lunch. Instead of sitting in the stuffy break room listening to people complain about their weekend plans, I like to take a quick 15-minute walk around the block or grab a coffee from the shop downstairs. Nothing crazy, just some fresh air and a change of scenery. I always made sure to be back within my hour lunch break, never missed any meetings and never left anyone hanging on urgent stuff, but apparently this was a huge problem for my manager. It started on a Tuesday. I had just gotten back from grabbing a sandwich and noticed she was hovering around my desk with that look she gets when she's about to make someone's day worse. She didn't say anything then, but I knew something was coming. The next morning, there it was in my inbox. A team-wide email with the subject line lunch break policy reminder. But everyone knew it was really meant for me. The email read, "Team, just a friendly reminder that lunch breaks are unpaid time. However, everyone is expected to remain available during core business hours, including lunch. This means staying in the office and being accessible for any urgent matters that may arise. Thanks for your understanding." I stared at that email for a solid 5 minutes. Available during unpaid time? That's not how employment law works, but I knew arguing would just make things worse. My co-workers were giving me sympathetic looks across the office. They all knew this was about my walks. Later that day, my desk neighbor leaned over and told me that the email was obviously about me and that my manager was being ridiculous. I told him I'd just eat at my desk from now on. He insisted I shouldn't have to change anything since I wasn't doing anything wrong. But I said it wasn't worth the fight. But the more I thought about it, the more annoyed I got. If she wanted me to be available during my unpaid lunch break, fine, I'd be available. Just not working. The next day I brought my lunch from home and set up camp at my desk at exactly 12 p.m. I made sure to log out of all my work applications, closed my email, and just sat there eating my sandwich. No headphones, no personal phone browsing, no working. Just sitting and eating like the most available employee in the world. About 20 minutes into my lunch, a co-worker from another department came over looking stressed. She asked if I could pull the client report for the Peterson account because she needed it for a call in 10 minutes. I politely told her I was on my unpaid lunch break right now, but I'd be happy to get that for her at 1 o'clock when I was back on the clock. She seemed confused and said she'd figure something else out. I thanked her. I could see my manager watching from her office, probably wondering why I wasn't jumping to help like usual. But I just kept eating my sandwich with the biggest smile on my face. This went on for about a week. Every day at 12 p.m. I transformed into the world's most visibly available but completely unhelpful employee. I'd sit at my desk, eat my lunch, and politely redirect anyone who needed work done to come back at 1. Then came the day that made it all worth it. It was a Thursday, and I was about 10 minutes into my lunch when my computer chimed with a message from my manager. I could see her in her office, clearly expecting me to jump on whatever she needed, but I just kept eating my salad and ignored the notification completely. At 12:15 p.m., another message. Then another at 12:20 p.m. By 12:30 p.m., I could see her getting visibly frustrated, looking back and forth between her computer screen and my desk where I was calmly finishing my meal. At 12:45 p.m., she actually got up and walked over to my desk. She asked if I had seen her messages, explaining that she had sent me 3 requests for the quarterly analysis report. I told her I had seen them, but since I was on my unpaid lunch break, I wasn't checking work messages. I said I'd be happy to look at them when I was back at 1. She insisted it was urgent and that the client was waiting. I explained that I was available if there was an emergency, but when she mentioned in her email, lunch breaks were unpaid time, so I wasn't working during unpaid time. She stood there for a moment, clearly trying to figure out how to argue with her own policy. Meanwhile, I noticed one of my coworkers had overheard and was frantically working on something at his computer. She told me that next time I needed to be more responsive. I replied that I was being exactly responsive by her lunch break policy required, available, but not working. At exactly 1 p.m., I logged back into my systems and checked my messages. The urgent report she needed, my coworker had already pulled it together and sent it off. Crisis averted, no thanks to me. About an hour later, my manager called me into her office. She said she wanted to discuss my lunch break behavior, mentioning that several people had told her I'd been refusing to help with urgent requests. I explained that I hadn't been refusing anything, I'd been following her policy exactly written. I pointed out that she said we needed to be available during lunch, so I was available. She also said lunch breaks were unpaid, so I didn't work during unpaid time. I told her I thought that was pretty reasonable. She started to say something about urgent requests, but I interrupted to clarify that I was available for true emergencies, but routine requests could wait until I was back on paid time. I asked if that wasn't what she wanted when she sent that email about lunch break policy. She opened and closed her mouth a few times, clearly realizing she'd painted herself into a corner. How could she argue against me following her own rules? She finally just told me to use my best judgment. I assured her I would continue being available during lunch breaks, just requested. The next week there was another team-wide email. This one was much shorter. Previous lunch break guidelines are no longer in effect. Please continue taking your breaks usual. I went back to my walks and coffee runs. My family was tight-knit on the East Coast where Sunday dinners were mandatory and everyone knew everyone else's business. My older brother was always the golden child. Star athlete, straight A's, dated the right girls from the right families. I was the middle kid who mostly flew under the radar, and my little sister was the baby who could do no wrong. We were close back then, especially my brother and me. We'd spend hours playing video games and talking about everything. That all changed when I met my wife in college. I was studying business at a decent state school when I took a semester abroad program in California. She was this amazing woman, smart, funny, and yes, she was a bigger girl, but I fell hard for her confidence and the way she could make me laugh until my sides hurt. She was studying environmental science at a smaller California school. Nothing fancy, but she was passionate about her work. When I told my family I was thinking about staying in California after graduation, you'd have thought I announced I was joining a cult. My mom cried. My dad gave me the disappointed silence treatment. My brother started making jokes about California girls and how I was throwing my life away for some fling. But it wasn't a fling. I got a good job out there, we moved in together, and 2 years later, I proposed. The engagement announcement went over about as well as you'd expect. My family barely congratulated me. My brother made some comment about how I was really going through with this. The complaints started small but never stopped. She took me away from the East Coast, like I didn't have my own free will. She was bigger when we met. Apparently that mattered to them somehow. She didn't go to a prestigious school like my brother's wife did. She doesn't want kids, which in my family is basically a cardinal sin. She's too girly with her makeup and dresses, but then not girly enough because she has opinions and speaks her mind. She seems cold because she's reserved around people who clearly don't like her. Imagine that. The turning point came early in our relationship when my brother made some nasty comment about her weight during a family video call. She told him that wasn't appropriate and asked him not to say things like that. He didn't like being called out, especially by someone he saw as an outsider. Since he is the favorite, the family rallied around him. Suddenly, she was the problem for being dramatic and not taking a joke. I tried talking to them so many times over the years. I explained how much she meant to me, how happy I was, how their treatment was hurting our relationship. My little sister tried to stay neutral, but even she wouldn't push back when the others got going. Eventually, I realized nothing was going to change. They'd made up their minds about her, and facts weren't going to get in the way. Meanwhile, her family embraced me from day one. Her dad and I have these amazing weekly walks where we smoke cigars and talk about everything from sports to philosophy. Her mom stops by our place just to give hugs and check in. Her brothers added me to their group chat where we share memes and plan fishing trips. Her sister actually baked me a birthday cake from scratch because she remembered I mentioned loving red velvet. This is how family should be. This past Christmas was the final straw. We flew back east for the holidays, spending money we didn't really have for the plane tickets. They didn't get her a single gift, not even a generic candle or something. They had their annual cookie decorating party and somehow forgot to invite her. I found her sitting alone in the guest room while everyone else was laughing downstairs. Later that night, I caught my mom and aunts in the kitchen talking about her. My mom said she just didn't understand what I saw in my wife. My aunt agreed, calling her standoffish and saying she barely said 2 words during dinner. Then my mom made some cruel comment about how much my wife ate and how no wonder she couldn't lose weight. My aunt added that my poor wife probably thought she couldn't do better than me. I stood there for a minute listening to them tear apart the woman I love, and something inside me snapped. I went upstairs, packed our bags, and booked us on the earliest flight out the next morning. We spent the rest of our vacation skiing in Colorado, and it was the best Christmas we'd had in years. Fast forward to last month. My brother and his wife are expecting their first child in July, a boy. The family is over the moon, and honestly, I'm happy for them too. Kids are a big deal. Then came the call. My mom was all sweet and excited, telling me they wanted me to come meet my nephew when he's born. She said they were planning a big family gathering. I told her that sounded great and that we'd look into flights. But then she said they were thinking just me this time, claiming that new babies are stressful and all. I told her no, that we're married and come together, or not at all. She said I was being ridiculous and that this was about meeting my nephew, not about my wife. I repeated that we're a package deal. She twisted my words and asked if my wife wouldn't let me come unless she came too, like my wife was controlling me. I told her no, that I was the one saying this because I was sick of them treating my wife like garbage. I said the whole situation was like something out of a trashy talk show. I knew that was the wrong thing to say the second it left my mouth. She went off, listing every petty complaint they had about my wife. She carries a water bottle everywhere. Yeah, because she's from California and staying hydrated is normal there. She doesn't laugh at my brother's jokes because they're usually mean-spirited. She seems uncomfortable at family events. Gee, I wonder why. Then my dad got on the phone. He accused me of holding adult problems against an innocent child. He asked if I was really going to miss being part of my nephew's life because my wife couldn't get along with the family. I told him she tried to get along, but they all decided they didn't like her before they even met her. He claimed that wasn't true and that they just wanted what's best for me. I shot back that if they really wanted what's best for me, they'd accept my wife because she is what's best for me. The call ended badly. My brother texted me later with the usual guilt trip about family and how I was being selfish. My sister called to try to play peacemaker, but even she couldn't deny how they'd treated my wife. I've been thinking about this for weeks now. Part of me does want to meet my nephew. It's not his fault his family are jerks. But if I give in now, if I go without my wife, I'm basically telling them their behavior is acceptable, that they can keep treating her like crap while they dangle family events in front of me. My wife told me she'd understand if I went. That just made me more determined not to. She shouldn't have to give me permission to stand up for her. So I made my choice. I called my brother directly. I told him I wouldn't be coming to meet my nephew unless my wife was welcome too. He asked if I was serious. I said I was dead serious, and that if he wanted me in this kid's life, then he needed to accept my wife. All of them did. He said she was the one who was divisive. I told him no, that he was the one who started this crap because she called him out for being a bully. I said now they were all doubling down instead of admitting they were wrong. He played the family card, saying we were family. I told him so was she, and until they treated her like family, they wouldn't be seeing much of me either. I hung up and blocked his number. Then I blocked my parents too. My sister I left unblocked, but told her not to play messenger. 3 weeks later, my sister called with news. Apparently, my absence was noticed at the hospital when my nephew was born. My brother's wife asked where I was. When they explained, she apparently lost it on them. My sister told me that my sister-in-law called them all terrible people and said she was ashamed to be associated with the family. She said if they think they can treat my wife like that, what were they going to do to her son if he didn't meet their standards? I told my sister good for her. My sister said my mom had been crying for days and wanted to call me. I told her my mom knew what she needed to do. It took another week, but my mom finally called. Her voice was shaky and small. She said she thought we all needed to talk about my wife. I asked if she was ready to apologize to her. Really apologize. She said yes, that she thought they all were. The family meeting is scheduled for next month. My wife is nervous but willing to try. I told them all that this is their one chance to make things right. If they screw this up, we're done for good. My brother's wife apparently threatened to limit their access to my nephew if they don't fix things with me. I lived in this neighborhood with my 2 golden retrievers, Max and Buddy. They are well-trained dogs who I walk twice daily and always clean up after. The neighborhood had always been peaceful, with most neighbors being friendly and understanding about pets. That changed when Karen moved in next door about 8 months ago with her 12-year-old son. From day one, she made it clear she wasn't a fan of dogs. It started with passive-aggressive comments whenever she saw me walking them. She would complain that my dogs were too loud in the mornings. I explained that they barely barked and we were usually out by 7, which seemed pretty reasonable. She said that some people liked their peace and quiet, making it clear she thought I was being inconsiderate. Things escalated from there. She started filing noise complaints with the homeowners association, claiming my dogs were disturbing the peace. Every complaint was investigated and dismissed because my dogs weren't actually causing any problems. The HOA president even told me privately that she was being unreasonable. Then came the property line disputes. Karen claimed my dogs were somehow damaging her precious flower beds just by existing near the fence. She demanded I install a taller fence at my own expense. When I politely declined, explaining that the current fence met all neighborhood requirements, she threatened to call animal control. The harassment continued for months. She'd glare at me whenever I was in my yard with the dogs. She'd make loud comments to other neighbors about irresponsible pet owners whenever I was within earshot. She even tried to get a petition going to ban dogs from the neighborhood, which nobody signed. Last month, things took a weird turn when she started complaining about my car. I drive a bright orange Honda Civic that I absolutely love. It's not everyone's taste, but it makes me happy, and it's perfectly legal. Karen told me that my car was an eyesore that was bringing down property values. I reminded her it was just a car parked in my own driveway. She responded that decent people didn't drive cars that color and that it was distracting and inappropriate for a family neighborhood. I honestly thought she was just running out of things to complain about. I had no idea she was planning something much worse. Yesterday afternoon, I was inside when I heard a loud thunk from outside. I looked out my window and saw Karen's son in their backyard with a bow and arrow shooting at something. When I went outside to check, I discovered he had shot an arrow that hit my car's front tire. The arrow was sticking right out of my tire, and air was already hissing out. I was absolutely furious, but tried to stay calm when I walked over to their yard. I told her that her son had just shot an arrow into my tire and that it was completely flat now. Karen came outside with this smug look on her face, like she'd been expecting this conversation. She claimed it was just an accident and that her son was practicing his archery skills for summer camp. I pointed out that he had shot the arrow directly at my car, not randomly into the air. Karen said that my car was such a bright color that it made a perfect target. She said I couldn't blame a kid for using what was available for practice. She was actually trying to justify her son shooting arrows at my property. I asked if she was seriously saying my car color justified her son damaging it with a weapon. She argued that it wasn't a weapon but sporting equipment, and if I didn't have such an obnoxious car, this wouldn't have happened. That's when I realized I needed to record this conversation. I pulled out my phone and started recording, making sure to keep it visible so she knew what I was doing. I asked her to clarify that her son was practicing archery by shooting at my car. She confirmed that was right, explaining that the bright orange color made it an obvious target for practice and that her son needed to work on his accuracy. When I asked if she thought this was acceptable behavior, she shrugged and said boys will be boys. She added that it was just one tire, and I was acting like her son had burned my house down. I had everything I needed on video. Her casual admission that she let her son use my car for target practice was going to be very useful. I told her I was calling the police now. She told me to go ahead, claiming they would side with her family. She said that my car shouldn't be that color if I didn't want it shot at. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Johnson was professional and thorough when he examined the scene and took statements from everyone involved. The officer asked Karen to confirm that she was admitting she had allowed her minor child to discharge arrows at my vehicle. Karen repeated that it was just practice and that since the car was orange, it was basically asking to be used for target practice. Officer Johnson explained that this was destruction of property regardless of the vehicle's color. He also pointed out that allowing a minor to use what was legally considered a weapon without proper supervision was a serious issue. That's when Karen finally seemed to realize she might be in trouble. She backtracked and claimed she hadn't done anything wrong, saying that kids practice archery all the time. The officer clarified that they didn't practice on other people's property or target other people's belongings. The officer reviewed my video recording and took photos of the arrow still stuck in my tire. He also noted that several other arrows were scattered around Karen's yard, suggesting this wasn't the first time her son had been shooting without proper supervision. Officer Johnson told both Karen and her son that they needed to come to the station with him. Karen protested that this was ridiculous over one stupid tire. The officer explained that this was about property destruction and improper weapon handling by a minor under her supervision. When they were being escorted to the police car, Karen was still arguing. She blamed everything on my dogs, claiming that if I didn't have them, none of this would have happened. I pointed out that my dogs had nothing to do with her son shooting arrows at my car. She ranted that everything I did was designed to annoy her, including the dogs and the car. The officer had heard enough and told her to stop talking and get in the vehicle. After they left, I called my insurance company and a tow truck. The tire was completely ruined and had to be replaced. The insurance adjuster confirmed that the damage was clearly intentional based on the arrow placement and the video evidence. Karen and her son were charged with destruction of property and reckless endangerment. Karen also faces additional charges for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The court date is set for next month. The Homeowners Association has also gotten involved. Apparently, using weapons on association property without proper permits and supervision violates several community guidelines. Karen is facing potential fines and restrictions on her son's outdoor activities. Karen's attempts to get sympathy from other neighbors completely backfired. Once word spread about what happened, several neighbors came forward with their own stories about her unreasonable behavior and harassment tactics. My tire has been replaced and I've installed a security camera system to monitor my property. I moved to my neighborhood after getting a decent job at the local insurance office, finally able to afford my own place after years of apartment living. The house isn't much, a modest 2-bedroom with a small front and backyard, but it's mine and I take pride in keeping it nice. My dad taught me early that taking care of your property shows respect for yourself and your neighbors. So every Saturday morning you'll find me out there with my trusty push mower, making sure my grass looks decent. It's actually pretty relaxing and I've gotten good at it over the years. My next door neighbor moved in about 6 months ago. She's a woman in her 40s who works from home doing something with online marketing. I don't know much about her since she keeps to herself mostly, but her yard has been getting worse since she arrived. The previous owners kept it perfect, so the contrast is pretty obvious. Last Tuesday evening I was just getting home from work when I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find my neighbor standing there with this fake smile on her face. She greeted me and said she hoped she wasn't bothering me, but she had a little favor to ask. I told her it was fine and asked what she needed. She explained that she was wondering if I could mow her lawn for her, describing it as just a neighbor helping out another neighbor. I was honestly confused at first. I mean, asking for help isn't weird, but usually there's a reason behind it. I asked if her mower was broken or if she was dealing with some kind of emergency. She said no, nothing like that. She just really didn't like doing yard work. She mentioned that she'd noticed I did such a nice job on my own lawn, so she figured it wouldn't be a big deal for me to just do hers too while I was at it. I stared at her for a second, trying to process what she was actually asking. She wanted me to mow her lawn simply because she didn't want to do it herself. I told her I appreciated that she thought I did a good job, but I was pretty busy with my own yard work and other stuff around the house. Her smile started to fade, and I could see her getting irritated. She said it was literally just grass, and wouldn't take me that long, maybe like 20 extra minutes. I explained that I understood it might not seem like much time to her, but I had my own schedule to manage. I suggested she think about asking one of the teenagers on the block, since I knew a couple of them did yard work for extra cash during the summer. She got more annoyed and said she shouldn't have to pay for something so simple. She insisted that neighbors help each other out. I told her I got that, but yard maintenance was kind of a personal responsibility. If she really didn't want to do it herself, hiring someone seemed like the logical solution. She called the whole thing ridiculous and said I was being completely unreasonable. I apologized that she felt that way, but said I wasn't comfortable taking on additional yard work right now. She huffed and walked away without another word. Over the next few days, I started noticing her giving me these cold stares whenever I was outside. If I was getting my mail, she'd be conveniently checking hers at the same time, shooting me dirty looks. When I was loading groceries from my car, she'd find some reason to be in her front yard, looking in my direction. The weirdest part was what happened to her grass. Instead of just mowing it herself or finding someone else to do it, she seemed to be letting it grow on purpose. Every day it got a little taller, a little more overgrown. By the end of the week, it looked like a small meadow compared to the other well-maintained yards on the block. I was starting to think she was using her unmowed lawn as some kind of passive-aggressive statement, like she was trying to make me feel guilty or something. The contrast between her yard and everyone else's was becoming really obvious, and I could tell other neighbors were starting to notice. On Saturday morning, I was out doing my usual lawn care routine when she came storming over. She said this was getting embarrassing and that her grass looked terrible because I wouldn't help her out. I replied that her grass looked like that because she wasn't taking care of it, and that wasn't my fault. She argued that I could solve this problem in 20 minutes, but I was being selfish. I told her that actually I had timed myself last week. My own yard took me about 45 minutes, and hers was roughly the same size, so we were looking at almost doubling my work time. Plus, if I did it once, she'd expect me to keep doing it. She said I was making this way more complicated than it needed to be. Just then, Mrs. Johnson from across the street walked over. She's this sweet elderly lady who's lived here for decades and knows everyone's business. Mrs. Johnson asked if everything was okay over here. Karen explained that she was just asking me to help her with her lawn, and I was refusing to be neighborly. Mrs. Johnson looked at Karen's overgrown yard, then at me, then back at Karen. She told Karen that when she was her age, she took care of her own yard every week. If Karen couldn't manage it herself, there were plenty of services in town. She mentioned that the Peterson boy down the street did excellent work for very reasonable rates. Karen insisted that neighbors should help each other. Mrs. Johnson agreed they should, like when someone was sick or dealing with a family emergency. But she said asking someone to do your regular chores just because you didn't feel like it wasn't neighborly, that was taking advantage. Karen looked around at the other neighbors, who had started to gather, drawn by the commotion. I could see the realization hitting her that nobody was going to side with her on this one. Mrs. Johnson offered the solution. She said her grandson would be visiting next week and he was saving up for college and always looking for odd jobs. She'd have him stop by and give Karen a quote. Karen walked back to her house. The next morning I noticed a lawn service truck in her driveway. By afternoon her grass was neatly trimmed and looked great. She still won't make eye contact with me, but at least the passive-aggressive lawn situation is over. and Mrs. Johnson gave me a knowing wink the next time I saw her, so I think the neighborhood dynamics have settled back to normal. About 10 years ago, I was living the fly in fly out dream. For those who don't know what that means, it's where you work at a remote site for a bunch of days straight, then get flown back home for your days off. The schedule was pretty sweet, 8 days on, 6 days off. When we were on site, we worked 12-hour shifts from 6 in the morning until 6 at night. I've been doing this job for about 3 years when everything went sideways. I was an equipment operator at a mining site, and honestly, I loved it. The pay was great, the work was interesting, and the team was solid. We all lived in the same camp during our rotation, which was about 5 kilometers away from the actual work site. The setup was simple and worked well for everyone. We'd all pile into the work vehicle at 5:30 in the morning and drive to the site together. This included whoever was managing us at the time. We usually got there around 5:40 and would start work right away, sometimes even earlier if there was urgent stuff to handle. At the end of the day, we'd wrap up around 5:55 and head back to camp together in the same vehicle. This system had been in place for years before I got there, and it worked perfectly. We were productive, we got along well, and nobody complained about the 5-minute buffer we gave ourselves at the end of the day. Most of us would eat lunch at our desks while working anyway, so it wasn't like we were slacking off. Then our new manager arrived. At first, she seemed reasonable enough. She followed the same routine as everyone else, rode in the vehicle with us, and didn't make any waves. But after about 2 months, something changed. She started getting really strict about everything, especially time. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. We'd finished up our work and were walking to the vehicle at our usual time of 5:55. The site was clean, all equipment was secured, and tomorrow's prep work was done. Just another normal day. The next morning, she called us all into the office before we even started work. She told us she needed to speak with all of us about yesterday. My co-worker and I exchanged looks because we had no idea what this was about. I asked her what about yesterday, and she explained that we had left 5 minutes early. She said our shift ended at 6 p.m., not 5:55. My co-worker pointed out that we'd always left at 5:55, and that had been the routine since before she got there. But she said things were changing, and from now on, we had to stay until exactly 6 p.m. with no exceptions. I tried to explain that we usually started early too, often arriving at the site by 5:40 most mornings, sometimes even earlier. But she said that was our choice and that the official shift was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and she expected us to honor that. I attempted to explain that we often ate lunch at our desks instead of taking proper breaks, that we were productive and efficient, but she wasn't having any of it. She kept saying the rules were the rules and 6 p.m. meant 6 p.m. Fine. If that's how she wanted to play it, we could follow the rules exactly. That afternoon, we stayed until exactly 6 p.m., even though our work was finished by 5:45. We just sat there staring at the clock. When 6 o'clock hit, we got up and left. But that was just the beginning. The next morning, instead of getting to the vehicle at 5:30 like we always had, we showed up at 5:50. After all, our shift didn't officially start until 6 a.m., right? She asked us why we were late, and I told her we weren't late because our shift started at 6 a.m. She said we always left camp at 5:30, and my co-worker explained that was our choice before. But since we were following official times now, we figured we should be consistent. She looked frustrated but couldn't really argue with our logic. The ride to the site was tense and quiet. We arrived at 5:55, just 5 minutes before our official start time. No more early starts, no more getting ahead on the day's work. But we were just getting started with our malicious compliance. Instead of eating lunch at our desks like we used to, we started taking our full 30-minute lunch break in the lunchroom. We also took both of our 15-minute breaks away from our workstations. When people tried to ask us questions or get help during these breaks, we'd politely decline. When someone needed help, I'd tell them I was on my lunch break and would get back to them at 1 p.m. Or my co-worker would explain he was on his 15-minute break and ask them to come back in 12 minutes. The impact was immediate. Tasks that used to get done during lunch breaks or while people were away started piling up. Urgent issues that we normally handled quickly had to wait until we were officially back from break. One day, there was a problem with one of the main conveyor belts. Normally, one of us would have jumped on it right away, even if we were on break, but not anymore. The site supervisor came over and said they needed someone to look at belt number 3 because it was making a weird noise. I told him I'd be with him in 8 minutes when my break was over. He said it could be serious, but I explained that I was on my official break time right now. The belt ended up breaking down completely because the small issue wasn't caught early. It took half a day to fix and cost the company thousands of dollars in lost production. This kind of thing kept happening. Work that used to flow smoothly started backing up. Projects that normally finished early started running late or carrying over to the next day. The whole site's efficiency took a nosedive. Our manager kept getting more stressed over the weeks. She'd pace around the office, making phone calls and looking at schedules, but she never connected the dots between her new strict policy and the sudden drop in productivity. About 3 weeks into this mess, her boss showed up for a site inspection. He was the regional manager and only visited every few months. When he saw how behind we were on everything, he wasn't happy. That afternoon, he called us into the office. He said he needed to understand what had been going on because production was down, schedules were slipping, and he was getting complaints from other departments. He wanted to know what had changed. We explained the whole situation, how we used to have a flexible system that worked well for everyone, how the 5-minute buffer at the end of the day was balanced by starting early and working through breaks, and how the new strict time policy had forced us to work exactly to the letter of our contracts. I told him we were following the official schedule exactly to the requirements, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., with proper breaks. He asked what happened before this policy change, and my co-worker explained that we'd usually start around 5:40 and work through lunch most days. The 5-minute buffer at the end just accounted for the drive back to camp. He looked at our manager, who was sitting there looking like she wanted to disappear into her chair. He asked her if this was true, and she admitted it was, but said rules were rules, and she was trying to maintain proper discipline. He asked how that was working out for productivity, and she didn't have an answer for that. The regional manager asked to speak with our manager privately. We could hear raised voices through the thin office walls, but couldn't make out specific words. About an hour later, our manager came out looking defeated. She announced that, effective immediately, we were going back to the old system. She said we could leave at 5:55 when our work was completed satisfactorily. I asked her what happened to the strict adherence to official times, and she just told us to go back to how we were doing things before. The change was immediate. The next morning we were back in the vehicle at 5:30. We started work early, ate lunch at our desks when needed, and left at 5:55 with everything completed. Production levels bounced back within days. But our manager never recovered from the whole mess. She'd lost all credibility with both her employees and her boss. She started second-guessing every decision and seemed constantly stressed. The easy confidence she'd had when she first arrived was completely gone. 6 months later, she was transferred to another site. We heard it wasn't exactly voluntary. Her replacement was a guy who'd worked his way up from the same position we were in, and he understood how things actually worked on the ground. The new manager told us he'd heard we had some issues with the previous manager. I told him we'd learned to follow rules very carefully. He said he was more interested in getting the job done efficiently than watching the clock, and asked if we thought we could make that work. My co-worker said we thought we could manage that, and we did. The new manager lasted 3 years before getting promoted to regional level. Under his leadership, our site became one of the most productive in the company. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.